This is the Spycraft 101 podcast. Welcome to your clandestine classroom. This is episode number 230 of the Spycraft 101 podcast. My guest for today is Matthew John Heath. Matthew served in the US Marine Corps from 1999 until 2003, including a combat deployment to Iraq. Afterwards, he worked with the US State Department as a private contractor in Afghanistan. In 2020, Matthew was arrested inside Venezuela near the Colombian border and charged with multiple offenses, including treason and arms trafficking. He spent more than 2 years in prison in Caracas before he was released in a prisoner exchange in October 2022, along with several other American citizens. I invited Matthew onto the podcast to discuss his service in the Marine Corps, his time working in Afghanistan and elsewhere, his arrest and imprisonment in Venezuela, and readjusting to life back home afterwards. But first, let me ask you this. Are you an amateur military historian like me? Has this podcast rekindled your interest in Eastern Europe and the Cold War? Maybe you're finally getting into reenacting and living history just like you've always said you would. If so, you should check out the incredible collection of surplus military goods at Krashiki.com. Chris himself scours the world for the best uniforms and field equipment available and delivers them right to your door. He's got almost anything you can imagine and many things you haven't. Uniforms from East Germany, the Soviet Union, and modern-day Bulgaria, Poland, and Russia are all available. Rucksacks, mess kits, and load-bearing gear are also up on the site right now. The inventory is constantly changing, so you never know what kind of gems you might stumble on, all at very affordable prices. Find it all at Krashiki.com. That's KRUSCHIKI.com. Or just click the link in the show notes of this episode and use the discount code SPYCRAFT101 for 10% off your order. Matthew, thank you for being here.
Justin, thank you for having me on. I know it's taken a long time for me to get here, but I truly appreciate the invite.
Oh, don't worry about it. I'm quite persistent, and some might say annoying, honestly, but sooner or later, almost everyone does say yes to me, and I've gotten a lot of wonderful interviews out of it. And I've been wanting to talk to you for, I would say, like a year or more at this point, probably?
Yeah, it's been more than a year. We've been negotiating coming on, and all the stars aligned with President Maduro being arrested here. And you caught me at just the right time. I'm excited. I'm a listener. I like the podcast, and I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm an early riser, so I was catching all of that stuff in near real time. And then I saw that you were also online, and I'm like, boy, I got to strike while the iron is hot. And it worked out. So here we are.
Well, I'll tell you what, I started getting phone calls at 2 a.m, but we'll get into President Maduro a little later.
Sure. So I want to go back to the beginning of your story, which is, of course, always the best place to start. Can you just tell me a little bit about your early life and what led you to join the Marine Corps in the first place?
Absolutely. Well, I'm from a small town in East Tennessee. My family has a history of military service. I looked at all the different services, and there was just something about the Marine Corps that called out to me. And it was a really great decision, I feel. That being said, I did later on in my life do a couple of years in the Army, military intelligence in the Army. But in my heart, I answered a Marine first. Boy, we're rolling the clock way back. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. I shipped off to boot camp. I was a 2621, which is a signals intelligence Marine. It was a foundational part of my life. I feel like it really helped shape who I am as a man. Sarah, this has been many years ago. Even when I go through different trials and tribulations in my life, the well that I go back to is the Marine Corps. It's been a big part of my life, and I'll always be proud of being a Marine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly understand that. I've known a number of guys like you who switched services later on, but they were first and foremost and always a Marine, no question. So you, during that first enlistment, you deployed to Iraq, right? Can you tell me a little bit about your time over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had actually went to Kuwait as part of Operation Southern Watch during 9/11. And then when we were preparing for the invasion in the fall of 2002, we started getting all the equipment, loading all the ships. I think it was December of 2002, January 2003. We got on ships in Virginia, went over to Kuwait and dispersed into staging areas. And then I was part of the initial invasion. I believe it was March 19th, 2003. Saddam Hussein, he messed around and he found out. The Marine Corps The Marine Corps rolled across the border, and Marine Corps is known for breaking things and hurting people. That's what we're good at, and that's what we did. Yeah, so I was so young back then. Saw some really big action in Al Nasiriyah with Task Force Tarawa, RCT2, second. I was with Second Battalion, 8th Marines. 1, 2, and 3, 2 were there. There were some friendly fire incidents with A-10s and AAVs. We lost a lot of Marines there. We lost a lot of Marines against the Iraqi army. That was the big Jessica Lynch operation, the 507th
Oh, wow.
Maintenance. Yeah, they ran
Yeah.
through on Nasiriyah, and it was not as low security area as it was supposed to be. The 507th they got banged up pretty bad. Task Force Terror got sent in there to help them out. We went in there and sorted it out. And after we got done with that city, there weren't any more problems there.
I mean, yeah. Wow, fascinating. So I did not realize actually that you were in the Army. I take it you did one enlistment in the Marine Corps. Did you switch immediately to the Army, or was there like a break in service for a while after that?
That was a short 10-year break in service. Just
Okay, I gotcha.
went by in the blink of an eye.
I see. So after your service, what made you get out? Did you have like another opportunity come up after your 4 years or your initial stint in the Marine Corps?
So I felt that I'd accomplished everything that I'd wanted to accomplish at that point in time in the Marine Corps. I went out on a high note. I was decorated for my actions in Non Nasiriyah. I performed pretty well there. It just felt like the right time to get out. I enrolled in the University of Tennessee for engineering. I did one semester there, and before I could complete the semester, I got a phone call from a guy who worked for Radio Reconnaissance Technologies, it's a civilian signals intelligence company. It's kind of famous in my community in that one of our officers got out and created a company that does pretty much what we do in the military, but as civilians. This retired master sergeant gave me a call one night, cold called me. I didn't know him at the time, and says, I work for this company. I work for RRT. Do you know who that is? And I said, yeah, anybody in my unit knows who that is. And he said, how would you feel about going to Afghanistan and doing some signals intelligence for the State Department? I said, well, I mean, I'm open to the offer. And he goes, okay, well, when can you leave? I said, well, how much time do I have to think about it? He said, before we get off the phone, you're either going to have a job with me and I'm going to buy you tickets while we're on the phone, or I'm going to call somebody else.
Wow.
It was a pretty good offer. He said, when can you leave? I said, give me 10 days and I can wrap up my stuff here. And then before you know it, I was in Bagram. Yeah, we started off in Kabul, then we popped up to Bagram. And that was the next chapter of my life.
Mm-hmm. So generally speaking, I know that very few people can really talk about day-to-day stuff regarding signals intelligence, but at the same time, I'm kind of surprised that the State Department was running that instead of someone else. So is there anything that you can tell me about that tour, like how SIGINT was being used by state
absolutely.
at that time?
So the contract that I was working on was called the Counter Poppy Eradication Force. So it was a pretty unique counter narcotics program where it was kind of a classic special forces, U.S. Army Special Forces mission where a team of internationals, guys like myself from, the Five Eyes type countries, so a lot of British, Canadians, that kind of guys. We were the subject matter experts. We were the advisors to a paramilitary force of Afghanis, about 500 guys. And we would go around the different parts of Afghanistan and destroy opium fields. Destroy poppy fields. There were other elements of the program that I can't get into that dealt with the actual destruction of the laboratories and the logistic stashes of like processed opium. But as far as the signals intelligence on that, a lot of it was pretty simple indications and warnings. So when you're in a really austere environment where there's not a lot of signals, so like the opposite would be someplace like New York City. There's a ton of signals in New York City. It's tough to even know what's going on there. There's so much. You're drinking from a fire hose. If you're in the middle of nowhere in Afghanistan, almost any signal is a signal of interest.
Okay, sure.
So one of my main duties was to provide indications and warning. Basically, are there bad guys out here using cell phones, using walkie-talkies, using any kind of VHF radios? As a signals intelligence professional throughout my career, a lot of times I work in places I don't speak the language. Sometimes I do. A lot of times I don't. So you work really closely with interpreters. You're like, I might be pulling down cell phones, just random cell phone calls. Hey, is this anything about us? You work with your interpreters. They know what to listen for. Really, the goal there would be to get an indication or warning of an imminent attack and pass that off to our paramilitary force so that we'd be prepared for something like that.
Okay, I see. Were you giving like 15 minutes warning, or is this something like, a day or two in advance you were like totally prepared? I mean, what's the time frame for this sort of thing?
Well, you never know what you're going to get with signals intelligence. So the thing is like, imagine you're intercepting phone calls. I don't have any control over what they're talking about. So it could be something that is imminent, or it could be them planning about planting a roadside bomb or explosives. One of the things that those guys would do they would go plant rockets on timers, and then they would on little stands. So then
Oh
they
yeah,
would
yeah, yeah.
leave the area, and then in 30 minutes, 60 minutes, those rockets would go off and land in our location. We did catch that occasionally. It was a fun job. I'll say that it was a fun job. There was a lot of landmines in Afghanistan.
Oh
That's the
wow.
first place that's the first place I got blew up in an IED. So
Oh
we
wow.
were, a lot of dirt roads. It was so far back that we didn't even know the acronym IED.
Oh my
I thought
gosh.
we drove over so I was in a F-350 pickup truck. We drove over an IED. So it went off. It didn't. We found out later. We called in the EOD guys. Actually, I think our EOD guys were Serbians, and they examined the explosives and they said this didn't fully detonate. The explosive maker didn't use enough battery to detonate, and only 1/3 of the explosive went off. And there, by the grace of God, I managed to get out of there with just a light concussion. But I remember I jumped out of the pickup truck, and in combat, here's how you know it's a real combat story, because it doesn't make any sense. Okay, when somebody's telling you a story and it just sounds like a movie, that's a lot of times those maybe they've been churched up a little bit. Let me tell you a real combat story. I jumped out of the pickup truck. I looked around, and there was a World War II fighting trench right next to the road. We're talking in the middle of nowhere, Afghanistan. There's nobody around. There's like a village like 2 miles away. I don't know where that trench came from. I have no idea. It was a perfect fighting trench. So I jumped down in it. One of our interpreters jumped down in the trench with me. I was obviously in a confused state. I thought, oh great, my interpreter, he's going to bear hug me, and then the assault force is going to come up here and I'm going to get shot. Now, that's just what went through my head at the time. So I told him, sit down on the ground on your butt, put your back to my leg, and if I feel you move, I'm going to kill you. And he said, no problem, I'm not going to move. And I was in that fighting trench. I was waiting for the assault force to come up there. I call him Father Time. He looked like he was about 110. He had a white beard down to his belt. And he had, we used to call them, they're called Cineo telephones. There's a famous picture of Osama bin Laden with one. It's this giant walkie-talkie looking cell phone. Again, at the time, we weren't even aware of IEDs. I thought it was a landmine. So I seen Father Time out there. He had his big cell phone, and he turned around and ran off. And that was the trigger man. That's one of the few people in my life that I had in my sights that I didn't shoot. That, looking back on it, I kind of wish I'd shot that guy.
Wow. What a story. My gosh. So you clearly, as a singer, you were not just doing everything from a Quonset hut and a laptop and all of that. Were you just like all over Afghanistan as a contractor at that time?
Yeah, I've been to most of the major cities in Afghanistan, except our operations. We didn't go out to Mazar-e Sharif that much. The political situation, I think that was Ismail Khan's territory, if I remember correctly. And to be quite honest with you, the people that the warlords that we were aligned with were not aligned with Ismail Khan. So we actually didn't do a lot of work out that way. I'd say the hottest place I got to, now, the story I just told you, that was in the Bamiyan province, but Jalalabad, down towards the Pakistan border, that was some hairy work down there. I mean, that at the time, the Taliban was rolling around 100, 200 guys. You had to be on your toes. If you were walking around looking soft, you were going to get in some trouble down in Jalalabad.
Dang. Okay. Incredible. And I believe that I read in some article online, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you were personally targeted, like you, Matthew Heath, where they had their sights on you because of the work that you were doing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah. So I was going on leave because of the grace of God. I'm not dead today. Or that's another time I'm not dead just through the grace of God. So the reason I can tell you a lot of details about this story is we actually ended up catching this guy years later and putting him on trial. The Taliban paid this guy $12,000 to drive a car bomb. He parked it in front of our house in Kabul. My team was taking me to the airport at the moment that all this was going down. He parked the car in front of our house and he just acted like it was having car problems. He walked off, got a block away or so, called his cell phone, which detonated the car bomb. It killed a couple of Americans, killed some of our local guard force. They were Nepalese Gurkhas, really incredible
Hmm.
soldiers. And unfortunately, it killed some innocent Afghanis. So it was a targeted attack that we found out later in the years later that man was put on trial. And the Taliban. So first of all, the Taliban claimed credit for it. They came right out and said it. But we also got the details later at his trial where the Taliban are aware of who works in intelligence and who doesn't, and they were specifically targeting me because I was targeting them.
Hmm.
We were costing them a lot of money.
My gosh, my gosh. So, I mean, they missed you by like an hour or something like that. Then I guess that was the
Yeah,
difference between
yeah,
life and
I'd
death
say
there.
about an hour. About an hour. The Kabul is honestly not the built up areas of Kabul. It's not a huge city, so my team was driving
Hmm.
me to the airport. Yeah, I'd say about an hour.
Wow, wow. So after that, did you return? Was that just you going on leave, or was that the end of your tour at that time?
Well, I'd had a car bomb, excuse me, I'd had the IED go off and then they bombed my house. And I'm one of those guys that I can take a hint.
Yeah, yeah.
So I go, well, you know what? I'm going to go work in Iraq. I got a phone call and it was another offer I couldn't refuse. I was working with the State Department. They said, Matt, would you like to transfer over to Baghdad? It's pretty hot over here, but they're not trying to kill you specifically. In general, they're not big fans of Americans, but
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I came over on the Worldwide Protection Program. Basically, it's a contractor that does the same job as the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. So we ran through all the same schooling that they did. We were contracted through the old infamous Blackwater, and that was a hot 2 years. Yeah. So
Hmm.
my team, Raven 2-3. Well, before it was Raven 2-3, which that's the Blackwater guys that were involved at Nasor Square. Before it was Raven 2-3, it was Templar 2-3. And the State Department caught wind of our naming conventions for our teams, and Templar didn't go over real well with
Oh
the
yeah,
Iraqi government, so they ordered us to change the names of our teams.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I can see that. I can see that.
So
Wow.
yeah, that was my old team. I wasn't there at Nasor Square. I was, through the grace of God, I was on leave at that time. So yeah, Blackwater was those teams, the Templar teams, running protection for State Department officials. My big protectee was I was on Team 6 with Ambassador Karsten. He was the Charge d'Affaires. He later went on in my life to speak out and call for my release once I was wrongfully detained
Hmm.
years later. So he's actually a Vietnam Marine. He's an amazing guy. To this day, I'm still very grateful
Wow.
for the relationship I have with him.
Wow, very cool. So you clearly have a skill set that's in extremely high demand. Did you mostly stay within Afghanistan and Iraq theaters, or did you like go worldwide with it at this point? Because this is back in what, like 05, 06, something like that?
So I left in early '06 and I went to Cairo, Egypt on my own. I enrolled in Arabic Language and Culture Center and I spent a year learning Arabic.
Wow. Wow.
Al Diwan Madrasa.
Hmm.
They don't ask me to speak Arabic because I'm not very fluent now, but I used to speak pretty good Arabic.
Oh, okay. Very cool. I mean, did that help you later on with some other career choices? Did you move on from SIGINT work, or did you continue doing that for a while longer?
Well, at that point in my life, I wasn't doing exclusively SIGINT. I was more of a security and support role for human intelligence.
Hmm. Okay. Okay, I see. Sounds like we're getting into like vaguer territory here a little bit.
We can tap dance that around a little. So
Sure.
from 2006, after I left Cairo, late 2006 until 2016, I was a GRS contractor.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. I did not
So
know that.
yeah, that was also with the State Department. And if you know, you know, right? So
Yeah, yeah. I have not seen that anywhere in any of the stories about you. Is that out there normally?
yeah, so it's out there. It's not widely publicized.
Okay. I see. I see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, that sounds like you've got a million stories, and probably 99% of them you can't really tell us. I did see some major gaps in the timeline in all the published articles and that sort of thing, but
Well, anytime that you're talking to somebody like me who's had a multi-decade career with the U.S. government, I started off, with a TSSCI clearance, and it only got better
mhm.
from there. So obviously, there's some areas that I can't talk about, but that's not fun for the listeners. So I'm just blowing right by those.
Yeah. I'm afraid most of my listeners are very, very used at this point to wanting to know a lot more than what we actually get into on the podcast. Unfortunately, that's kind of the nature of this line of history. I'm
Yeah.
afraid, but
No,
yeah, we've
hey, that's that. When you are in intelligence, you got to understand that there's always, the onion always has another layer. There's
yeah, yeah,
always
definitely,
another layer. And, eventually you just got to become okay with understanding you're never going to know the whole picture. And I mean, that's me too. That's me
right, right,
too.
right.
There's a lot of stuff that has happened in my life, in my work that I'm like, yeah, I don't know what happened after that. I don't know. Never saw that guy again.
Yeah, yeah, I bet. Yeah, I had a couple of years ago. I interviewed Eric Miades, and I don't know if you're familiar with him at all, but he started out in the mid to late '90s in SIGINT as an enlisted soldier, and his career went down a very very specific and narrow path after that. Most of which we couldn't really talk about on the podcast. So that reminds me of you just a little bit.
Well, I
He was a
would,
fascinating guy.
it sounds like the kind of guy that if I knew him, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm teasing. I
Gotcha.
honestly don't think I
Oh,
recognize the guy's
okay,
name.
okay, cool, good, good, good. So you
Or
did
am
mention
I?
early. Matthew. Like, so you did mention rejoining the military and joining the army later on. Was that what, like 2016 or
So
something? I
in
mean,
2010 to 2012, while I was working for the State Department at the GRS, I enlisted in the Tennessee National Guard
hmm,
as a way to keep some of my clearances and skill sets and trainings. There's certain training that's only available to the U.S. military, and I enrolled in some different programs, and that was a way to just keep one foot in the military door, and then also, I was working as a civilian for the U.S. government.
okay, okay, I see. So that was, I mean, that probably, I have to guess that could not have taken up much of your time then, as
You know
pulled in different
what?
directions as you were.
I did have to take some time. So I was in the Army from 2010 to 2012. And I was blessed that both my civilian work for the State Department was, by that point, I was, mid grade. So they were extremely flexible with when I wanted to work, when I was available to work, they had work for me. And honestly, my unit was extremely flexible with me. And they said, whenever you can do some work for us, you put in your days. There were some schools that I took. So everybody was working together. It was one of the few times that I can say that all elements of the U.S. government were humming along in total synchronicity.
Wow. Yeah, I was just thinking like two bureaucracies letting a person do what they want. That's got to be like a miracle there. It's amazing.
It's pretty rare, but when you're making money for people, they cut you some slack.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I understand if people know you're gainfully employed one way or the other, that definitely helps a lot. I'm sure. So I want to fast forward then to 2020, which is I think kind of what we're here for.
Yeah.
Really, can you just talk about where you were like in life at that point?
You know, from 2003 until 2016, I was in Iraq specifically and various other countries that aren't very friendly every single year. I'm not great at math. I'll let the crowd add that up for me. It was a lot of years. And
Hmm.
I got pretty tired. I got pretty tired of working in Iraq and those kinds of places. And I needed a change of scenery. I said, what do I love? I love nature. I love the ocean. Pretty big fan of Latin American women. So the Iraqi women get to wear the burqa. A lot of women wear the burqa now. So I thought I'd go somewhere that I could enjoy the scenery a little bit better. That turned out to be the Caribbean. I'd saved up a pretty good amount of money. I'd been paid well over my career, and ended up buying a boat, sailing around the Caribbean, basically doing a Captain Ron, seeing how much beer I could drink and how friendly I could be with the natives. And it was a nice way to pass a few years. I was making enough money to break even, and what I had in the bank, everything seemed to be going great until I'm going to blame all this on COVID. COVID's where it started.
Hmm.
So I get into Cartagena in late 2020, visit a friend of mine down there. Time goes by, the COVID lockdown goes crazy. All the airports are shutting down. You got to have like your car sprayed with disinfectant and permission from the governor to go from one state to another. And I go, you know what? This isn't a lot of fun right now. I'm gonna go somewhere else. So looked around. I couldn't get out of Colombia. The airports were shut. They weren't letting anybody come in. They weren't letting anybody leave. And like a guy who's taking a lot of risks in his life, I go, well, heck, I bet that if I go to Venezuela, I can get to Aruba. I was trying to get to Aruba. Well, like a lot of guys, like a lot of Americans in Colombia, all of a sudden a Venezuelan pops up and gives me the good idea ferry. And he goes, you know what, Matt? There's a ferry goes to Aruba every day. And if you just come with us to Venezuela, we can get you on that ferry. And like a moron, I'm like, sounds great, guys. Let's go. Crossed into Venezuela. I was there for about a day, and then I was immediately arrested at a checkpoint in a taxi on my way to a ferry, or what I thought I was on my way to a ferry. Unbeknownst to me, this Venezuelan was working with the Dirección General contra Inteligencia Militar, which is the Venezuelan counterintelligence. The Venezuelans run these operations in Colombia where guys, even with training, you're not paying attention, it slips by you, and all of a sudden you've been wrapped up in something a lot bigger than you. So the DGCIM tricked me. They set a little trap for me. They got me to come into Venezuela. I was arrested. I was violently interrogated. I was tortured. So I was given 4 charges. Eventually, I learned about them. It was treason, arms trafficking, missiles, conspiracy, and terrorism. So, you know, I'm really happy that that's not on my record in the United States, because I don't think they'd sell me a pack of beer up here if I had that.
Hmm.
Let's see. Where should we go from here?
Just from some of the reports I've seen that they, claim that you were caught with some weapons, some pistol magazines, that sort of thing. Did you have anything like that on you at the time?
Oh no. I'd like to tell people I didn't have a fork and a knife. Okay. I was in a tiny little taxi. They said that I had missiles that wouldn't even fit in the car, machine guns, bags of money. All of these things were fabrications. So when I was arrested by the National Guard in Venezuela, they immediately posted a photo of me and everything that I had with me, which was the kind of regular stuff you'd have in your pockets, like your wallet and an ink pen and a bag of clothes. I was traveling pretty light. That proof was, I tried to use that at my trial later to show that when I was arrested, surprise, surprise, I didn't have a carload of missiles. However, there was a second set of arrest documents produced. At that point, they said, no, actually, Matt did have, you know, he was really set up to have a good time in Dallas. He had a carload of missiles, bags of monies, and machine guns. I was like, well, this is going to be a long, drawn out affair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what's that old song? They said send lawyers, guns, and money. Well, I needed some lawyers and money. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
the U.S. State Department contacted my family, and they said they thought that I'd been detained. They've been monitoring the news in Venezuela. President Maduro took all the suspense out of the air, and he declared at the UN General Assembly that I'd been detained. I was a CIA mercenary sent to attack the Amway refinery, and that the US government had sent me. So at that point it became pretty clear that it was a continuation of a system that President Maduro has has acted on since he came into power in 2013. During his reign, over 40, I think it was about 44 Americans had been wrongfully detained in Venezuela as a policy tool for his interactions with the United States.
Okay. I see. Why do you think that you specifically were targeted while you were still in Colombia by the undercover guy? Did they have any inkling who you were at that time?
I think that they targeted me while I was in Colombia because, publicly it's known that I was in signals intelligence in the Marine Corps.
Okay. Okay, I've got you. So they knew once you had actually arrived, border control or whatever in Colombia, they figured out who you were and that you were there and put this together on the fly, you think?
I think that it was planned from when I was in Colombia.
Okay. How long were you down there before you actually crossed the border?
Well, I was visiting a girlfriend of mine in Cartagena. I think I might have been there a couple of months.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's time to put something together, not a
Yeah.
hasty sort of thing. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were, just to be clear, you were not working down there at all. This was your like in between your tours, personal vacation kind of time. Is that correct?
I hadn't been working for the U.S. government since 2016, so I'd been
Oh,
off.
wow.
I'd been
Okay.
off the books for 4 years. To be
Okay.
honest with you, I'd gotten a little lackadaisical. I wasn't even thinking about,
Hmm.
the State Department. I was thinking, well, I'm just down here having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dang. Okay. And the good time turned bad very quickly then. And I
Well,
guess they let you across the border with no problems, man, because that was, beneficial to their purposes.
that's the entire plan.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in jail, and like I mean, you said already it was pretty horrifying with the torture and everything. Were they trying to extract like a forced confession, like get you to sign something, anything like that?
Yeah. So the first part was pretty strong interrogation. So you're talking electrocution. The first thing they did is they stripped me naked. 6 guys came in and beat the crap out of me. Then they threw buckets of water on me and handcuffed me in a room that I don't know how cold it was. There wasn't icicles forming, but it was pretty cold. And then they handcuffed me to a bed frame with no mattress and brought in a car battery and some modified jumper cables, and they electrocuted me. All this was interrogation to get information, which it was impossible for me to give because I didn't have any information.
Mm-hmm.
They were asking me, where's the CIA base, where are the missiles, where's the planes. I was like, there has been a terrible mistake. I do not know what you're talking about. And then after about 2 or 3 days, I heard a couple of my interrogators talking, and they're like, "This guy doesn't have anything. Like this is nothing." And at that point, it shifted to they were trying to coerce me into making statements. So that
Mm-hmm.
at that point, they just created this fantasy that I was sent there to attack the oil refinery. And I know that this sounds a little odd, but you got to remember in Venezuela, the different elements, they don't communicate with each other. They are very incompetent. If things don't make sense in Venezuela, that makes sense to me. They are it's not this is not a system this is not a system ran like the Germans where the trains run on time. The left
Mm-hmm.
hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing in Venezuela.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can actually see that perfectly. That does make a lot of sense there. So, were you ultimately like were you provided with a defense lawyer, or did somebody from state show up at your cell? Anything like that? Like was there ever or when was the time I guess that law and order started to sort of assert itself in some way?
So first of all, there are no U.S. government officials in Venezuela. They were
Hmm.
asked to leave by President Maduro, I believe, in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's no the only people I was visited twice by State Department officials who were visiting from the United States as part of ongoing negotiations. Other than that, the only diplomatic support I received in person was during one of my hearings. The Swiss embassy sent a representative as a as basically a show of support.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
which was, incredible. That was very much appreciated
I bet.
personally.
I bet you
Um,
did have a defense attorney at some point, right?
So at first I was assigned. So if when you talk to Luke Denman and Aaron Berry,
Hmm.
they weren't allowed to have a private lawyer. And, I think that they would agree that they were coerced into a lot of different decisions. I was initially assigned a government lawyer. I refused. I'm pretty dumb, but that helps me be pretty tough. And I just absolutely refused any participation. I said, no, I have a private lawyer. Well, of course they hadn't let me make any phone calls. They said, well, great, who's your lawyer? And I said, I don't know, but I know that I have a private lawyer. I know that the support systems that I have, I'm going to have a lawyer. I just refused to participate in the trial until several months later, they finally allowed a lawyer that my family had hired to come give me some paperwork. And the trial actually didn't start. The wheels of justice grind very slowly in Venezuela. I shouldn't even call them the wheels of justice. The show trial
Hmm.
grinds very slowly in Venezuela. Eventually, months later, under President Biden, there was some political pressure put on the Venezuelans to actually accelerate my trial from one hearing a month to several a week. However, it's just, in the beginning, you're in shock. You think there has been a terrible mistake and you have confused me with somebody else. They've mixed up the paperwork. You're just in denial. You're like, this has just been some sort of mistake. And then, of course, you learn over time that it's not a mistake. This is government policy for Venezuela. And you learn that it's just a show trial. It's just a show trial. I tell people, you know, it re- Venezuela copies, I'm not going to say Russia, they copy the Soviet Union. So when you think of like all the inefficiencies of the Soviet system, that's best practices in
Mm.
Venezuela.
Mm.
So, the Soviet show trials under Stalin in the 50s, that's exactly what's happening right now in Venezuela. And just real quickly, I want to say there are 5 Americans that I'm aware of who are detained in Venezuela right now. And all the things that I'm talking about, all the mistreatment that I suffered, all the injustice that I suffered with my show trial, that's what those 5 Americans. Now, I'm telling you about a story that happened years ago. There are 5 Americans down there. This is what's happening to them right now.
Mm. Wow, I did not realize that. I knew about the exchange that involved you, of course. I did not realize that there were still people there at this moment.
Well, unfortunately, this is a topic that just keeps coming up. There's always somebody out there who's going to make a bad decision, and unfortunately, we have 5 cases that I'm aware of right now of Americans. I've been doing some media. I've been calling on interim President Delcy Rodriguez. I've been asking her to immediately release those 5 Americans if she is able to receive this message as a show of goodwill towards the United States as our governments move towards some sort of new equilibrium. I think it would be a beautiful gesture of goodwill if you immediately release those 5 Americans.
Oh, yeah. I think that would go a very, very long way. Are these individuals that you knew, like, have they been down there that long that you were in prison with them?
So I've been in my freedom now 3 years. Thanks be to God. I don't know these 3 individuals personally.
Hmm.
As someone who works in kidnap and ransom advisory services, I also volunteer with an organization called Hostage US, which is an absolutely amazing organization. I would encourage your listeners to check them out. They're one of the few organizations that provide recovery services when hostages come back, absolutely
Oh,
free of
wow.
charge. They're a charity, they're an NGO. They are one of the best organizations I've ever met in my life. They supported my family while I was detained. They supported me during my recovery. And as part of giving back as an act of service, I volunteered with them. And, so I'd actually, if we could take a second just to talk about Hostage US.
Yeah, by all means. By all means.
Well, they support your family. People that are detained, your family suffers. Your family suffers while you're
Sure.
detained. Hostage US provides access to medical care, to psychological care. They're counselors. They can advise families on, most people don't have a crisis management playbook for if their loved one gets detained. And hostage US, this is what they do. So they know who you need to talk to at State Department, and they know who you need to call with the media. They also support detainees when they return, like myself, and they provide pretty much any kind of service that you need. They can provide it to you. It's extremely individual. Whatever that person needs, that's what they do. And I'll never stop singing Hostage US's praises. They're the reason that I've recovered to the point that I have today.
Hmm.
And then just kind of a little end cap on that. I actually, because of my experience in Venezuela as a detainee and my previous experience as an intelligence analyst, I also work privately with corporate clients on what I'll use that old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I love to get hostages back, but you know what I love even more? Preventing somebody from becoming a hostage. So
Mhm.
working with corporate clients and talking to them about the kinds of risks that they face and how to avoid getting into situations that you have an elevated risk of detention.
Yeah, that would be tremendously useful. My gosh, the amount of heartache that could potentially save is just incalculable, I have to imagine.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. Fantastic
Well,
stuff.
just on top of that, when somebody gets detained, this is the difference between a problem and a predicament is a problem has a solution and a predicament has an outcome. When
Mm.
someone is detained, that's not a problem that can be solved. It's a predicament. It has an outcome. There's a before and there's an after. Now, we can make the best of the situation after we recover that person, but there is no going back to the way things were before they were detained.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that I mean, that's just such a dividing point in your life and in all of their lives as well. It's hard to imagine. So I have to ask, Matthew, what happened with your family back home then? I mean, I have to imagine that they were just kind of in the dark, like you were in Cartagena and then you weren't, is kind of what I'm imagining right now.
Yeah, that's exactly right. First of all, I was in total communication blackout for 11 months. So what I'm about to tell
Oh
you
my
now, I
gosh.
learned years later, but I was told that that the U.S. Embassy in Bogota monitors the media in Colombia, excuse me, in Venezuela, and they picked up on a news channel or who knows where they picked it up, but they picked up some chatter that I'd been detained. They contacted my family and they said, "We think that Matthew's been detained in Venezuela." So that was the first contact my family had, which hats off to the State Department. And I've worked for them for a long time, and they came through and they worked for me. That being said, it was really difficult. It was really difficult, specifically, the communications blackout, not being able to talk to my family for 11 months. So I have to keep coming back to the well here. I was a Marine. I'm a tough guy. Did it suck? Yeah, but I've had situations that sucked. I've been through that before. I can tell you absolutely the hardest part was knowing that my family was suffering and there was nothing that I could do about it.
Mm.
That was by far that was worse than any beating. Justin, I've been beat up before, and I'm probably going to get beat up again in my life. I don't care. I'm a tough guy. Knowing that my family was suffering because that I was detained in Venezuela, that was that's what hit me. So the short answer is I suffered knowing that they were suffering. Quite honestly, I'll just leave it at that. They absolutely suffered. I was taken away from them for 25 months. They suffered knowing that I was mistreated. I do tell people publicly that I was tortured, but I don't go into the details. I can just say it was pretty rough. If
Hmm.
I'm willing to tell you that they electrocuted me and threatened to kill me, like, I'm lucky that some things didn't happen, thank God, but they were pretty rough on me. I've been hospitalized more than once. I'll give you an example. They weren't shy about kicking you in the head. I mean, they
Oh
they were
wow.
not they were not treating me with kid gloves, I'll tell you that.
My gosh. Were you? I mean, were there times when you were despairing that you would never get out? I mean, that you thought you would, die in there maybe sooner or maybe later?
You know what? I'm going to be completely honest with you. the massive majority of my time, I never had any doubt that the United States was going to get me out of there. I'd be lying if I didn't say that there weren't a couple of bad days that I had a bad moment where I did feel depressed. And those went by real quick because I knew in my heart the kind of people that were working to get me out because that's who I used to be. And I know that those kinds of people, they don't quit. And they were going to work my case until they got me home. And that's exactly what they did.
Fantastic. So when did the light kind of first appear at the end of the tunnel? When did you get like an inkling that things were actually in motion to get you out of there?
Before I move on to that question, I want to tell you real quick. The Venezuelans put cameras and they would hide microphones in my cell. And I'm not crazy. I'm telling you, they would hide pretty good sized microphones in the light fixtures and stuff. And I would break and destroy as many of them as I could find. But just to tell you how confident I was in the United States government, I always had a suspicion that I didn't get all the microphones. So every day when I woke up, I'd say the Pledge of Allegiance twice, twice in a row. I wanted them to know that I would never make any statements against the United States government, no matter what. That being said, as you can imagine, I wasn't on very friendly terms with the Venezuelan government. So I found out that I was going back to America at 6 a.m. the day that I was leaving. They didn't give me much of a heads up.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, yeah, this representative of President Maduro's office came to where they were holding me. I'd never met him before. He woke me up at 6 a.m. and he said, Matthew, you're going home today. You're going to America. We need you to get dressed. We need you to get ready. We're going to go. I cussed him up one side and down the other, and I told him to get away from me. I said, you're not allowed to talk to me. Get away from me. I don't know who you are. I don't want to talk to you. A lot of blue language. And we did that about 3 times, and then he finally gave up and left. I'd been lied to. These guys, they'll use psychological warfare on you, and I just refused to play their games. I wasn't very nice to them. So they brought in another prisoner. They brought a prisoner into my cell where they were holding me. It was a really nice old man, spoke perfect English, a guy named Pedro Leon. Real just incredible person. Don Pedro says, Matthew, they said you're leaving today. I said, Pedro, they're lying. I said, Matthew, they took me downstairs. They showed me the van that's waiting. They said you got to get ready to go. You're leaving right now. What am I going to do? Like fix my hair and put on a suit? I looked at Pedro and I said, I'm ready. Let's go.
Oh, wow.
So they brought in a nurse. He said they got to give you a quick physical before we leave. Will you let the nurse give you a physical? I was like, sure. She looks at me and goes, yeah, sure. He's healthy enough. Let him get out of here. He's healthy enough. Get this guy out of here. They throw me in a van, put a bag on my head, drive me to an airport. We meet up. I meet up with 6 other Americans. We fly to a little island in the Bahamas. We do a prisoner swap like out of the Bridge of Spies. They got 7 of us walking across the runway, one at a time, and then they release President Maduro's nephews on the runway. We pass each other in the middle.
Wow.
They get on their plane, we get on ours. 6 a.m, I wake up in Venezuelan prison. By 11 o'clock at night, I'm in Texas.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It was one of the best days of my life.
I'll bet. I mean, were you like kind of in shock the whole way? Were you in disbelief, until you touched down or something like that? Or were you totally ready for it?
So when we landed in the Bahamas, in Canoan, all the other guys were screaming and laughing and patting each other on the back. One of the guys looks over at me and he says, Matt, what's wrong? Celebrate. We're free. And we'd landed. I said, they can turn this plane around, roll out onto the runway. We'll be back in Venezuela in an hour. I'm waiting to see what happens. I didn't celebrate until Roger Carstens Ambassador Karstens, retired Colonel Karstens landed. And then I knew, okay, he's not going to let us out of here. No matter what happens, Ambassador Karstens is not going to let these Venezuelans take me back to Venezuela. So that's when I celebrated. When I walked across the tarmac, I passed the nephews, and I was greeted by the State Department officials, by Colonel Karstens, and that's when the shock set in. It was incredible. It was a really incredible feeling.
Man, can't imagine. So earlier you mentioned Luke Denham and Aaron from Silvercorp, and I think a lot of my listeners are already kind of familiar with that story somewhat. Did you have any interaction with them? Did you see those guys or any of the other Americans that you've mentioned, or were you kind of like kept isolated?
So a big majority of my time I was kept in isolation. That being said, they were actually held at a different facility by a different organization, so I never met them. And they were also detained before I was in Venezuela.
Right.
They were held in El Ecoide, which is ran by Sabine. That's the Foreign Intelligence Service of Venezuela. I was held in Casa de los Sueños, the House of Dreams, which is ran by the DGCIM. That's the domestic military counterintelligence.
Incredible. They call their prison the House of Dreams. That's amazing.
Well, I tell everybody, I got to say, it sounds like a daycare. It sounds like a place you could drop some kids off. Sounds nice. The House of Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Got like Dumbo painted on the wall. It's not a nice place. The name is deceptive. I'll tell you that.
I believe it. My gosh. So did it take you a while to readjust once you got back home? I mean, what were those first few weeks like for you?
The first few weeks are hard. I'm not going to lie to you. I've been kept in isolation. I've been brutalized. I've been tortured. The first few weeks were hard. I struggled to just be any kind of normal, And at a year, I would have told you that I had recovered. But at 2 years, I would tell you that at 1 year I wasn't recovered. So now here I am at 3 years, and I'll tell you that I feel completely recovered. But who knows? Maybe in 5 years, maybe in a couple more years, I'll look back and go, well, Matt, at 3 years, you weren't completely healthy. Mm-hmm. I am blessed from God. I'm successful with my work. I'm successful with my family. I get to spend a ton of time with all my relatives. I'm truly blessed from God. I feel amazing, and I'm giving it back. I want to dedicate myself to working on prevention with as many clients as I can. And pro bono, I work on the detainees that are in a hard spot all around the world through Hostage US.
Fantastic. Yeah, that sounds like, in my mind anyway, the best possible way to deal with what you've been through is to, kind of turn it into something very positive for others as well.
Well, it's a way of giving back because somebody like me has been given so much. So many hundreds of people have worked on my case. They sacrificed so much time and energy to get me home that I like to tell people there's an army of people that got me home, and I'll never get to meet all of them. Mm-hmm. And the only way I can possibly deserve what they did for me is to try to in some way help other people. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm passionate about what I do. Crisis management is what pays the bills. Prevention is what pays the bills, but working on the guys that are unfortunately detained, like our 5 Americans in Venezuela, that's what keeps me fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can understand that completely. Amazing. So, Matthew, we're recording this episode on the Monday after this enormous operation in Venezuela, and just a couple of days ago, of course. So can you tell me how you're feeling and how you were feeling the moment that you learned what was happening there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I feel like $1 million right now because I just saw a picture of President Maduro in handcuffs wearing flip-flops. And if you haven't been a detainee, you don't know how good it feels to see President Maduro, who's clearly been stripped of all his regalia, his $100,000 watches, his $10,000 cigars, Oh, President Maduro, how the tables have turned. Now you're just a common prisoner in the Southern District of New York. It is, I don't know if a second Christmas is a strong enough term for how good I feel right now.
Wow.
Yeah, I got a phone call. I wasn't surprise. I wasn't watching the news at 2 in the morning. I got a phone call. The phone call started coming in at 2 in the morning a couple of days ago. Within about 2.5 hours, it had been released that President Maduro had been extracted. Our old D boys, Operation Absolute Resolve. They are just running the board down there. I wanted my hats off to those guys. I just think back to the first big public Delta mission, Operation Eagle Claw, and what that was, an unfortunate disaster, and then how far even Delta's come, the creation of the 160th, an absolute flawless victory, incredible. I'm just incredibly proud to even be a citizen of the same country as those guys.
Oh, I know it. I know it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know anything about, planning and carrying out a gigantic covert operation like that. And I know that clearly it's the result of tremendous preparation and experience and expertise and that sort of thing. But it also feels like a real miracle that it came off as cleanly as it did, and just a tremendous like generational win, really, for everyone involved.
Well, I don't think there's another country in the world that could have did it. It looks like a miracle to us, but the reality is, yeah, of course, God blessed all that, but that was the culmination of a massive amount of planning and preparation.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be more coming out about this, in the future, and I'm eager to learn more as everyone else is. But yeah, just a tremendous focal point and a tremendous accomplishment for everyone.
As the
And it's
details are declassified, this will be studied in military academies around the world for decades to come.
oh,
That's
I
how
believe it.
big of a operation this was. It was a flawless victory.
I believe it. So, Matthew, I'm actually wondering with Maduro at some point, maybe soon, maybe later, going to go on trial. Is there any chance that you might be called for that trial, like as a witness or anything like that? I mean, is that on the horizon for you?
Well, that's a great question. None of my other interviewers have opened that up.
Hmm.
I've been working with the FBI for 2 years as a plaintiff against President Maduro for his
Oh, wow.
violation of my human rights. It's not on what he just got arraigned on, but yeah, President Maduro most likely will be charged for the violation of my human rights along with several other people's. So yeah, there's a very real chance that in the years to come, because we look back, the only template we can use is Manuel Noriega. His trial lasted several years. President Maduro, Nicolas Maduro, his trial's probably going to last several years. There's a very real chance that at some point I'll be called on to testify against him.
Hmm. Gosh almighty, that's going to be incredible.
Well, I mean, I'll walk down there with a smile on my face. I'll be pretty happy about it.
Yeah, yeah. I believe it. I believe it. I hope that this is not all behind closed doors. I hope that the public gets a glimpse at what goes on in this trial. I don't know if that's on the horizon.
We'll have to do another phone call here, and,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
give you all the inside details.
Oh, please do, please do. Yeah, keep me in mind for any future developments. And you seem like a guy that has more adventures on the horizon, regardless. So,
Well,
yeah, I would look
we're
forward to
always
another
out
call.
there doing some fun stuff, and as the story develops, well, I'll keep you posted.
Okay, wonderful. So, and on that note, can you provide? Do you have contact info for Hostage US or for your own service as well right now
Abs-
that you want to leave with us?
Absolutely. If you can just Google Hostage US, and my personal website is matthewjohnheath.com. I'm available for media inquiries. And more importantly, if somebody out there hears this message and they've got a loved one who's having some problems, drop me a message and I'll see if I can get you some help.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Matthew, I really appreciate your time today. This is an incredible story and just an incredible time for us to be talking about it as well. So, thank you so much for sharing some very painful memories, I'm sure, and some triumphs and some tribulations as well.
Well, Justin, I've really enjoyed my time here. I want to thank you for this opportunity to raise awareness about the Americans that are still in Venezuela. Believe it or not, this kind of media attention is what drives different administrations to put the resources in and really expedite those trades.
Hmm.
So I
Hmm.
want to thank you on their behalf.
Of course, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Matthew. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Take care. If you're interested in more of Spycraft 101, look for my page on Instagram at Spycraft101. You can also find more great articles on my website, spycraft101.com. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you'll stick around because there's lots more to come.
Disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The stories and statements expressed herein are experiences and opinions. They may not reflect the views of the host or the production studio. It's okay if you disagree with our content. No piece of media is right for everyone. If you love Spycraft 101, please check us out online, on Instagram, on YouTube, and especially on Patreon. Thank you for listening.